Okay. Hello and welcome to the Parsha class, Parsha Truma 5786, the commentary of the Taam Dagan. We'll try to learn some lessons that are food related, kosher related in this week's Parsha. Of course, last week's Parsha had pretty much the mother lode. In Mashpatim, we had many, many laws, including bitul and different concepts regarding bitul, which means to nullify something. Also, concepts in basar b'chalav, meat and milk, and in related topics. And we'll see how in this week's parsha we'll have also quite a few lessons, perhaps not as many, but nevertheless quite a bit to keep us busy and to keep us satisfied. So without any further ado, let's share the screen and the source sheet here of the Taam Dagan Parsha Truma, in which the Torah teaches lessons about using kosher animals for mitzvah purposes, the relationship between our physical actions and the spiritual world, and treating our tables as holy vessels, and more. So Hashem starts off in this week's Parsha telling Moshe to gather Truma, to gather gifts for the building of the Mishkan, the traveling tabernacle with which the Jewish people traveled in the Midbar, in the wilderness. So he says, the Beral B'nai Yisrael v'yichuli Truma, hence the name of our Parsha here, the eponymous verse. Hashem says to bring for me Truma, me'et kol ish asher yidvenu libo, from every man whose heart inspires him to give. Tikru et trumati, take for me my truma, which we're translating here as offering, which is it's a start. And later on, of course, the next verse says, "V'zot ha-truma asher tikru mi'itam." This is the truma that you shall take from them. Zahav v'chesef u'nechoshet. They should give gold, silver, and nechoshet. Well, I guess we're translating it as brass. Either way, not really the focus of the parsha here, but it's worth mentioning here that Truma is also the name of the gifts to the Kohen. The Kohen is given something called Truma later on in Jewish history, and this is the support. This is the food with which we feed the Kohen. And reason that both of them are called Truma is because both are physical things donated for spiritual ends. So says the Tam Vadat. So they are not exactly related, but they are connected in that way by their title. In other words, they're both called Truma because that's what both of them do. They are physical, they send off in a spiritual way, and that's going to be very much so. It's going to be the theme of the Parsha class today. It's going to be a repeated theme. This again reminds us of a repeated theme. Here you go. Our physical existence is supposed to be dedicated to demonstrating Hashem's spiritual truths in this world. That's our goal. That's the goal of life. That's the Kiddush Hashem that Hashem created us for in this world. If you're looking for your purpose in life, the Mesilat Yesharim, Rab Chaim Moshe Luzzatto, the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, tells us quite clearly that the goal of life is to make a Kiddush Hashem, to take this world and to use it for spiritual means, which is what we do here. Furthermore, the letters that spell Truma, Taf, Resh, Vav, Mem, and Hey can be arranged to spell Mem, which is 40, Mem Torah. So the words of Torah are in the word Truma. You can't have Truma without Torah, representing the Torah that was given to Moshe in 40 days. Mem, Torah, right? This suggests that Torah was given for the sake of those holy people who eat Truma, says the Baal HaTurim, for using a Midrash in Tanchuma. Furthermore, Hashem's ending the previous Parsha with the word night and starting this Parsha with a discussion of Truma alludes to the halacha, and this is back to the Truma of the Kohanim, the halacha that the time when Truma may be eaten by someone who was impure but went to the mikvah is in the night when the stars are visible. Now, some of you might know this from the very first page of the Talmud. the very, very first Masechta, Brachot, the very, very first page, talks about the idea that you can say Shema at the certain time of night when the stars appear, and that's when a Kohen is able to eat his Truma. So, very kind of famous piece amongst people who even just begin to learn Torah. It's a very well known Mishnah in the beginning of Brachot 2a. Okay, a few verses later, we are introduced to some other materials that were used for the building of the Mishkan. Amongst them is V'orot Elim, the skins of Elim, of rams. Ma'adamim, they're made dam, they're made into blood colored, they're colored red. V'orot Techashim, and the skins of a tachash. V'atzei shitim, and the wood of acacia trees. Now, before you ask, hey, how did they get acacia trees in the middle of the midbar? The answer is the Midrash asks the same question, and the Gemara asks the same question, and so they say there that Yosef, knowing that the Jewish people would be traveling in the midbar, he planted acacia trees in Egypt so that they would cut them down and bring them with them, and with that be able to build the Mishkan. The sages teach. Now, you might have noticed that I didn't translate one of the words in this verse. That's tachashim, whatever a tachash is. So a tachash is an animal. It seems had skin, and its skin was used in the building of the Mishkan. But the actual identity of that animal is not entirely known, as we'll see. But the sages teach that only kosher animal species can be used for mitzvah purposes. So the tachash species had to be a kosher animal. This is true even though we are unsure if it was wild or domesticated. In other words, we don't know what animal it was. We don't know if it was more similar to a deer or if it was more similar to a cow. But what we do know for sure is that it was not a seal. Right? A seal is not a kosher animal. So I don't know why Techashim is often translated as seals, aside from the fact that how would they ever have access to seals? I'm not even sure how, I don't know the history of how many seals lived in the Middle East at the time, or if the archaeologists are finding any of their bones, but certainly I would imagine that they were not living in the midbar, in the desert, in the wilderness, right? So it's so either way though, it was definitely a kosher animal. This is true even though we are unsure if it's wild or domesticated. This creature no longer exists according to the Talmud, and it was only created to be available for that time only. The exclusive use of kosher species for other mitzvos is hotly disputed. Now, for some mitzvot, it doesn't seem to be a problem to use kosher, non-kosher animals. But when it comes to like tefillin, because tefillin, the Talmud tells us in the Menachot that the tefillin have to be made from the same thing with from basically from a kosher animal, even if it wasn't kosher slaughtered, even if it was roadkill or whatever. The animal itself, the species, its skin can be used to make tefillin. Because we want the Torah that people say when they're wearing the tefillin to be as holy as the Torah that's inside the tefillin, right? The inside the boxes of tefillin are quotes from the Torah, and so therefore we want the equally kosher Torah to be coming out of the person wearing the tefillin. So that being the case, it's the use of kosher species for other mitzvot is a big discussion. And I don't want to really step into it too much, but I'll just give you an example of how debated it is that there are people today who think we have the tchelet, the blue dye with which some of the tzitzit are supposed to be colored. I would say the majority of people still wear all white tzitziot, right? Right. Demonstration, right? Tzitzit. Uh, but there are people who believe that the tzitzit have to have the tchelet, and that we sometime after the Talmud apparently we lost the tradition of what animal exactly was used to dye these strings blue. So some people think it is a kind of mollusk, a kind of yeah, mollusk, and it's a not kosher animal, and its blood, after photosynthesis and after certain processes, its blood turns bluish. Funny, it doesn't look bluish, and then and then with that they color the tzitzit. Now that's some people. Other people have other opinions about which creature exactly it was that was used. But what's interesting is that none of these are kosher to eat species, which brings up our question here. Does it have to be a kosher species in order to do a mitzvah with it? See, it gets complicated. So some people say yes, and those people who say yes, obviously, are amongst the many people who do not wear this any kind of any of the opinions of what tchelet is. In case you're wondering, the Gemara in Menachot, we're actually in the Daf Yomi learning this topic right now. The Gemara there says that basically that if you don't have, if you're not sure if of it's better to wear all white than to wear the wrong kind of blue. If you just found a blue string, doesn't mean that it's kosher tchelet. It could be somebody colored it blue with a crayon, a sharpie, whatever it is. So, how do you know that it's made from this kosher, or maybe not necessarily kosher species? Then you have to find out. You have to do research. But it's better to wear white than to wear the wrong blue. Okay. Further. Hmm. A moment. Okay. So okay. So that's a big debate, and that's what I mean by it's a hotly disputed topic. But there is discussion in the Talmud elsewhere in Baba Kama 101a that the coloring of an object is a significant action. There's a discussion there, like is it an important thing? Is it a real thing? And therefore, there's good reason to think that the colors on a mitzvah object must come from kosher material. Similarly, and this is unrelated to a mitzvah object per se, but food. Right, so food coloring comes from sometimes non-kosher sources like carmine, which is made from dried blood of insects. Delicious, right? Since it goes through a significant chemical process, this might make it different. It's not blood anymore. It's the dried, almost like dust of the blood, etc. And that's kind of what it is. It's dried into a powder, really. So that might make a difference. But in the end, because of the serious negative spiritual effects of eating non kosher food, that doing so can block up our hearts, this should not be eaten, according to Rav Wosner in Shevet Halevi. Okay, so we go a little bit further, literally the next verse, and we learn that shemen lamaor, that shemen was used for illuminating, for lighting, besamim l'shemen hamishcha, and there was spices for the oil, l'ktoret hasamim, and sweet incense. And again, all these things were donations to the Mishkan. The Ramban points out that there are some scholars of the past who hold that samim is different than besamim. That samim means medicine, and bisamim refers to food. That's what they thought. Now, the Ramban does not like this opinion. He disproves it quite significantly, quite forcefully. The relationship between food and medicine, though, is complementary. For instance, the rabbis considered it critical to eat before bloodletting and presumably for other medical procedures. Certainly, eating should only be for health reasons. We're not supposed to eat for any other reason. One of our great prophets calls the table of idolaters one that is covered in vomit and filth. Our sages use this imagery to contrast between a table where Torah is said and shared. In other words, it's a contract in a table where Torah is shared and one where it is not. Sorry, one second. In other words, the Jewish table is one marked by eating for holy purposes. Again, we have that theme, right? The kind of table that the prophet describes is meant for eating for purely physical pleasure, when the goal of food is to accomplish eternal perfection and wholeness. Our food accomplishes this mission. However, if our goal is for monetary enjoyment, even our understanding of Torah will be impaired, says the Sforno in his commentary there in Pirkei Avot. There's a story told by our sages, Bava Kama, I believe, Bava Batra, sorry, 74a, that one sage placed a basket of bread between heaven and earth. As the earth turned, the basket disappeared. When the earth turned more, the basket reappeared. One lesson that can be learned from this story is that everything we do that is physical can be connected to spirituality. There's the sometimes this physical bread that was on earth became in heaven, right? So again, the bread that we eat is not just for pleasure. Rather, it is so we can daven and learn. If we use our physical assets for spiritual growth, we will continue to be blessed with the physical things we need. There's a somewhat well-known historical event where Rav Yosef Karo discusses his conversations that he had with an angel who came to teach him Torah. And it's all recorded in a book called Magid Meisharim, and that angel warns him to attach himself to Hashem, His Torah, and His Mishnah, and to not let his thoughts wander for even a moment, neither from Torah nor from fear and service of Hashem. Also, he warns him not to eat any pleasure at all. Rather than make his eating holy, he should think about Torah topics with every single bite. In this way, his eating will exemplify a sacrifice. This, he says, is the secret of the verse in Mishlei 23:1. When you sit down to dine with a ruler, understand well what is before you. So what's the ruler? What's something before you? So according to this angel, this means that when you sit down to eat bread, you should know that it is together with the evil inclination that controls a person, right? Obviously, we need the evil inclination. It is the reason we do some of the things we do that are good, right? It's there are the famous story in the Talmud that the rabbis prayed that the evil inclination should leave, and they were listened to. And then when they came out the next morning, they noticed that the chickens weren't laying eggs anymore. Right? If we want chickens to lay eggs, if we want men and women to have children, we are going to need the Yetzer Hara. We're going to need the evil inclination also. We're supposed to use the evil inclination for good, right? Not just always suppress it. They're normal human urges, and they're supposed to be listened to in a kosher way, in a kosher time, a kosher place, the right person, etc. There's a way to use every inclination for positive things. So that phrase, right? Again, we had this pasuk we're trying to explain from Mishlei. When you sit down to dine with a ruler, understand well what is before you. Sorry. What's going on here? Okay, 1 second. Give me one moment. What's this happening? What is happening? Um, Copy. All right, sorry about that. You probably saw more than you needed to see. Okay, we're back to this though. Um, right. Interesting. Okay, so to understand well who is before you means that you should realize that the Shekhinah stands before you. This is the angel still speaking to Rav Yosef Karo. Um, One who eats alone is not like one who eats before the king, right? You eat differently when you're in front of in front of holiness or greatness like that. And so one who eats alone is different. To be careful to eat only a little, uh, primarily for your soul, he suggests eating only a small amount of radishes or fresh vegetables. We should also remember that when earlier generations tried to derive pleasure from food and drink, they did not benefit. It also means, this verse, right, that the Shekhinah is above us, especially when eating, so that we will be ashamed of taking from Hashem's world for the wrong reasons. Since we are comparing our tables to the Mizbeach, just as the Kohanim had a special job of Hagasha, of bringing the mincha to the Mizbeach, the meal offering to the Mizbeach, so should it be the job of the most important, significant, and honorable person to bring the food to the table on Shabbat and Yom Tov. So says, so says the Divrei Yisrael. Okay. All right. Um, Furthermore, doing so shows modesty and demonstrates that we are doing things to honor Hashem. Right. I don't see any other decorations in that house. Okay. It's like no color at all. How do you even know it's other? Some babies will never even know it's other. Ah, so sad. Okay. Chapter 25, verse 11. Misha, Misha, Misha. Tzipita oto zahav tahor, and you're going to overlay it. So we're talking about the Aron Kodesh. You should overlay it with gold, pure gold. Mibayit umichutz, from inside and outside. Tipatzenu. That's how you're going to cover it. You're going to. So it's a wooden box, and you're pouring gold on the inside and the outside of it, sort of to cover it over to make it look golden. V'asita alav zer zahav saviv, and around it it gets a golden crown. So on this topic, the symbolism of overlaying the wood with gold, both on the inside and outside, demonstrates that the Torah should be like food. How should it be like food? That it transforms both the inside and outside of a person. I think the Kutzker says that, right? Yeah, the Kutzker Rebbe says that. So that's the idea, right? Just like food gives us nutrition on the inside and changes our body shape sometimes on the outside, right? So too. That's what Torah is supposed to do. That's why the Torah is inside and outside gold in for this wood. Okay, very good. Good wood. All right. Very nice. Okay, chapter 25, verse 23. Um, second. All right. So these the it says that Vasita Shulchan, you're going to make the table. Table is, of course, symbolic of food. It has food on it. It literally has the showbreads on the table. Atze Shittim, it's made from acacia wood. Amatayim Arkov Amarachbo, it has 2 cubits, 2 amot as its length, and 1 amma is its width, its breadth. And not only that, amma v'chetzi komato, and its height is an amma and a half. So the topic of the shulchan following the Aron alludes to the idea that mentioned in Pirkei Avot. This is the second time we're mentioning Pirkei Avot that I know of in this class. That 2 people eating together must discuss Torah in order to merit the Shekhinah. Um, and that's a significant thing. What we're saying is that this shulchan is like our table. We treat our table the same way as that shulchan is. That shulchan had holiness, had somehow connected. Right? It followed right after the Aron. The Aron had the Torah in it. So too, we need to have Torah at our tables to merit to have the Shekhinah, just like they did in the Mishkan. Next verse, chapter 25, verse 24. Mitzipito, and it also gets what? Covered. That's right. Zahav tahor with gold. V'asito lo zer zahav saviv. And it gets a crown of gold around it as well. The shulchan represents wealth and greatness, according to Rashi. This is because Hashem instills blessing into those things in which a natural cause for blessing has already taken root. In other words, this is wood that grew up. It had blessing in it. It was already moving, was already growing. We cut it down, and now we're using it. But at some point, it was a growing thing. And because it already had sort of like a spiritual inertia, right? It already had some sort of blessing in it. So now that blessing took root and can now be used for other things. Therefore, this is the Ramban. Therefore, eating even a small amount of showbreads placed on the shulchan are satisfying when eaten. Of course, when it's eaten. What else did you do when you're eating it? Right. So. Is that also the Ramban? Let me just double check. Yeah, the Ramban based on the Gemara in Yoma 39a. Okay, just a few verses later, we're told about that same shulchan's vessels. Vasita karotav chapotav. You're supposed to make its dishes, its pans. Uksotav umakniotav. It's a good thing I'm not leaning right now. uh, Uminakiotav. It's jars, it's bowls, it's pans, right? Asher yasach, that it's everything. The bowls that are used for yusach, sorry, for pouring out bahen. Zahav tahor, they're also gold, they're also pure gold. Tasa otam, that's how they are made. Now, what's interesting is we learn how big the showbreads are and you do the math, you see very quickly that the bread is actually wider than the shulchan that it's on. So what do? You fold on both sides. You fold the bread to fit it properly. Now, what's interesting is the bread needs to conform to the table's measurements, not the other way around. If we know the bread is going to be this big, so make the table that big. But we don't. Why? Because this represents the idea that we need to conform our actions to Torah, not vice versa, not the other way around. Not oh, well, we're doing this, so let's make the Torah allow it now, or something to that effect. That's not how we do things. Okay, Vasita et neroteha shiva. We're talking about the menorah now. The menorah had 7 branches, including the middle branch. It had shiva. It had 7 branches. That's how you're supposed to make it. Et nerotecha. You're supposed to make it. You're supposed to the hala et nerotecha. You're supposed to light its lamps. Veheir, and it is supposed to bring light or enlighten to what? Al aver paneha, on the onto its face. Onto whose face? Which face are we talking about here? So some commentaries say it means to that the all of the lights of the menorah light up its own face. They sort of glow towards the middle of the menorah. There's clearly reason to say that, but the Rashbam and Dat Zakenim tell us something else. Remember for a moment where the menorah is. The menorah is right next to the shulchan. So when the menorah is lit, it enlightens, it brings light to it, to the shulchan. The face that is supposed to be enlightened by the menorah is the shulchan's. Symbolically, this indicates that our holy endeavors, like learning Torah, represented by the menorah, should shine a light on our physical lives. In this way, we do not eat just to have pleasure for its own sake, a theme like I said before, that we've said before. Our physical enjoyment should then feed our spiritual lives in a sort of symbiotic relationship. As our sages put it, if there's no flour, there's no Torah, and if there's no Torah, there is no flour. The shulchan in the north symbolizes wealth and plenty, whereas the menorah in the south represents Torah wisdom. Oznaim Torah talks about this. On this earth, we first try to provide for material needs. Only after that can we pursue spiritual goals. For that reason, Hashem created Adam's body first, and only then blew spiritual soul into his nostrils. A body without a soul decomposes and is ruined. The same is true of bread. A man must strive to acquire it and eat it to be able to study Torah. Conversely, if there is no Torah, there is no flour. Hashem and his Torah therefore begins this command that the shulchan be made and placed in the north. Then he commanded that the menorah be placed opposite the shulchan in the south, thus demonstrating the connection between them. Man naturally knows that without flour there is no Torah. Hunger can overtake a student. I'm sure you've all felt hunger before. However, the idea that without Torah there is no flour is a matter of faith. How do you know? Not everybody feels the same way about it. In order to strengthen the faith among the Jewish people, Hashem commands them to place the shulchan outside the partition, where you can see it. It has to be outside the partition. It is true that one should first engage in setting up the shulchan, which is the bread, yet he will only be successful in the undertaking if the menorah, which is the Torah, is opposite the shulchan. If a Talmid Chacham wants to be successful in learning, he should not care about the food he eats, but be satisfied by whatever he eats. Acting this way earns a person a meal prepared by Hashem himself. So says the Gemara in Eruvin 54a. The proper way to earn this is to indeed be careful about what we eat, but to not waste an inordinate amount of time on it. Marsha. Okay. Um, two more verses for our class today. Just some short comments, really. Not much to say indeed here at all. But Amma Mizeh Odef Beorech Yiriod HaOhel, and the Am on one side, Am on another side of that which remains over in the length of the curtains of the tent. So now we're talking about the curtains on the tent. There's going to be an Am on either side. That much shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle on this side and on that side to cover it. Probably call it Mishkan, right? All right. It is important to upkeep beautiful things, as we have the responsibility of stewardship for Hashem's amazing world. This is a commentary of Rashi here. Uh, Again, the goal, the point being that we have these beautiful things, we need to take care of them. This cover covers up the Mishkan in order to protect it, more or less. Obviously, it doesn't need protection. The Shekhinah is taking good care of it, but we have a responsibility to do that. So that's how that's done. Um, Next verse 27:19, it says L'chol kliya mishkan k'chol avodato v'chol yitirotav v'chol yitod chatzar nechoshet. All the instruments of the mishkan and all its service and pins and all the pins of the court shall be brass. Right. So the Znaim LaTorah we've discussed already before, focuses on the idea of the table and the menorah. Right, the menorah represents Torah knowledge, represents Torah learning and knowledge, and the shulchan represents, as we said before, food, and the two are supposed to be interrelated, and that's how indeed that's how it is in real life and in our lives as well. That the more we connect the Torah we learn to the food we eat and how we eat it and why we eat it, the more we'll see blessing in our lives and in our food, and God willing, and many other things, especially in this happy month of Adar, where we have a lot of opportunities to see the blessings in our lives and to be misameach, to have simcha in Adar. Mishenichnas Adar marbim b'simcha. We have simcha, that we're happy, and happy means understanding our role and our responsibilities in this world. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Shabbat shalom.